Voin vaikka aloittaa. Tervetuloa kaikille. Mä selitän nyt aluksi suomeksi ja sitten vaihdetaan kieltä tässä välissä ja sitten palataan taas suomenkieliseen osuuteen. Eli tänään puhutaan intersektionaalisuudesta. Ja alun perin meitä tosiaan piti olla 2, mutta sitten Saara tajusi, että Alessandra voisi olla todella hyvä lisä tähän että hänellä on sellaista tutkimusta meneillään, joka liittyy tosi vahvasti tähän teemaan. You can maybe we can introduce ourselves here. Eli mä voin vaikka aloittaa. Mun nimi on Akunna Onven ja olen tehnyt aika paljon erilaisia töitä antirasismin, yhdenvertaisuuden, tasa-arvon parissa erilaisissa järjestöissä ja kouluttanut paljon, mutta sen lisäksi mä oon nyt sitten päivätöissä ollut erilaisissa ministeriöissä, tehnyt myös yhdenvertaisuuteen liittyviä töitä. Tällä hetkellä on tuolla sosiaali- ja terveysministeriössä ja teen siellä romanipolitiikkaan liittyvää hanketta. Ja mä oon myös mukana sellaisessa kollektiivissa kuin Good Hair Day, ja siinä tehdään antirasismia ehkä vähän eri tavalla kuin perinteisesti Suomessa on tehty, että tehdään sitä sellaisella meille periaatteella afrosuomalaisille ja sitten myöskin ehkä vähän sille enemmän ilon kautta se tapa, miten ollaan lähestytty koko tematiikkaa. Ja ehkä mä voin heittää sitten pallon seuraavalle meidän puhujalle tässä, niin voitte esitellä ittenne, ja tässä näkyykin vähän tätä päivän aikataulua, että miten me ollaan ajateltu tätä aika joustavasti, mutta ehkä Saara voi esitellä itsensä ja sitten vaikka kertoa tuosta aikataulusta pikkasen lisää.
Joo, toki. Tervetuloa munkin puolesta. Mä oon Saara Loukola. Mä oon taustaltani alun perin opettaja, työskennellyt Suomen lisäksi myös ulkomailla, kuten Turkissa ja Israelissa ja Thaimaassa, mutta sitten työskennellyt aika pitkään tuolla koulutuksen kentällä niin, että ollaan vedetty Akunnan kanssa työpajoja antirasismista tosi paljon aikaisemmissa töissä. Ja nyt teen väitöskirjaa Helsingin yliopiston kasvatustieteellisessä tiedekunnassa aiheesta antirasismi suomalaisessa yläkoulussa. Ja päivän aikataulusta sen verran, että tosiaan me nyt aloitellaan Alessandran luento-osuudella, joka on siis englanniksi, mutta siinä tulee sitten Alessandra käyttää slaideja, niin ne auttaa sitä kuuntelemista, ja me ollaan kuitenkin Akunnan kanssa koko ajan tässä. Sano vaan Akunna, jos puhuit näitä, mun yhteys katkesi hetkeksi, mutta ei, okei. Et jos tulee mitään, mitä ette ymmärrä tai vaatii selvennystä, niin voitte kysyä chatissa, me autellaan, ja sitten käännetään myös kysymyksiä, että voitte myös, jos on kysymyksiä tai kommentoitavaa, niin kysyä joko viittaamalla tai chatissa ihan suomeksikin, jos haluaa, ja me autetaan kyllä sitten kääntämisessä. Mutta tässä Alessandran luento-osuus ensin, sitten pidetään pieni tauko, varmaan pyritään pitämään vähän pidempi kuin 5 minuuttia, etänä kuuntelu on kumminkin eri lailla kuormittavaa. Ja sitten työpajaosuus on suomeksi, ja sitä vedetään minä ja Akunna sitten, ja siinä keskustellaan sitten enemmän tavallaan teidän oman työn näkökulmasta, päivän teemasta, eli intersektionaalisuudesta. Mutta tervetuloa mukaan, ja maybe Alessandra, you can go next.
Yes, hi, hello. So my name is Alessandra Aldrovandi. I am a doctoral researcher with Sara at the Faculty of Educational Sciences at the University of Helsinki. And today I am going to present to you about an introduction to intersectionality. I will then also talk about my research and how the two interlink together. So a little bit of a timetable for this part up to 12:55, as Sara said. So we are going to have an initial reflection, initial activity, individual activity, initial reflection. Then I'm going to guide you through the history and the meaning of intersectionality, to then have a look at intersectionality in the Finnish context. And then in the second part, I am going to tell you a little bit about my research and how intersectionality helped me as a lens to analyze the topics that I am researching about. And then the final two elements of this lecture will be a data quotes reading and discussion in groups, and then a final discussion all together in the plenary room. Are there any questions at this point? Please feel free, as Sara said, to ask anything in the chat, anything that you don't understand, anything that you require some clarifications on, just put them in the chat, please. Okay. And so let's do it. So let's start with a little bit of personal reflection about identity. So identity is one of the core ideas at the basis of intersectionality. And what I would like you to do to start with is to start talking about, or to start thinking about yourself. So who are you? So what would you describe your identity, and what makes you who you are? So take a couple of minutes to perhaps write it down, perhaps some bullet points, perhaps you might just want to think about this. So what makes you you? What are the aspects of your identity that make you who you are? And to think about this, you might want to think about the groups that you belong to, the spaces that you navigate in your daily life, as well as your previous experience, your life experience, your past experience. And this doesn't have to be shared with the group. It can be a personal reflection. If you want to, you can at the end of this initial reflection, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think about it to start with, okay? Yes. Okay, so is there anyone that might want to share anything about what they thought, initial reflections, any comments, any questions? Thing that you thought during these couple of minutes? Any ideas?
I thought it was also interesting to think which intersections are not so important to me or that don't have so. For example, in my part, I noticed that religion doesn't play a big role in my identity or how I'm thinking of my identity. So also thinking of those that are not so meaningful.
Thank you, Sara. Definitely a good point. Does anyone want to share? Otherwise, you can keep it personal and we can continue. Yeah. maybe you want to share it later anyway during the course of the lecture. So let's dive into if I can change the slide. Yes. So intersectionality. What is intersectionality? Intersectionality is an idea, a concept that was first advanced by Kimberly Crenshaw, who was and still is a scholar working in law. Sorry, there is a mistake there. In law in US academia. And she came up with a framework. She developed this framework because she wanted to describe and highlight and very much denounce the conditions that were affecting Black American women's lives, African American women's lives in her context. And she portrayed these conditions as affected by different identity elements, different categories of identities, and the consequent oppression that people were experiencing as a consequence of those identity dimensions and categories. And the core elements of this framework were gender, as well as race and class. So the daily lives, as well as the societal interactions of Black women in the US were affected by different elements and different social categories, such as gender, but also race and class. And she uses this metaphor of the intersection. The intersection, when we think about intersection, you have a picture here. It's the elements that compose this traffic, right? The traffic that comes from different ways. So in Yuval Davis's text, there is a quote by Crenshaw that says, quote, "Intersectionality is what occurs when a woman from a minority group tries to navigate the main crossing in the city. So the main highway is Racism Road. One cross street can be colonialism, then Patriarchy Street. So she has to deal not only with one form of oppression, but with all forms, those named as road signs, to make a double, a triple, a many-layered blanket of oppression." So in this quote, we can see how she uses this metaphor to actually portray and make it visual the fact that people's experiences are made up of their identity layers. But Crenshaw was not the first to think about how different identity categories impact people's lives. She was the one that coined the term, but actually many Black feminist scholars before Crenshaw's use of the term intersectionality had already talked about how people's experiences, and in particular Black women's experiences, are affected by oppression on the basis of gender, race, and class. For example, Angela Davis, in her text that is Woman, Race, and Class, which is considered one of the main texts on one of the main novels, texts on intersectionality. Then we have Patricia Hill Collins as well, who wrote Black Feminist Thought, Knowledge, Consciousness, and the Politics of Empowerment. And so did Bell Hooks as well, in her text, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, where she addressed how feminism up until that moment hadn't really come to talk about or to discuss what actually Black women were experiencing, and it was a very white perspective on feminism that feminists by that point had portrayed. There was very little space for Black women to have a voice in the feminist movement until then. And so these Black feminist scholars had already advanced the importance of talking about gender, yes, but also combined with other aspects of one's identity, and mainly race and class, but also other layers of identity depending on the context as well and the time where we're analyzing people experiences. So one aspect of intersectionality we said was identity. But identity is just one part of the idea of intersectionality, because when we are talking about intersectionality, we're talking about the social relations as well as the everyday individual's experiences as affected by, or as privileged, I should say, by some identity categories, depending on what these are and how these are considered in the context and time and space. But we can't really talk about intersectionality without talking about power. And we have to, when we use intersectionality, is to analyze. So we use it as an analytical tool, we use it as a theory, and we use it as a methodology as well, to view how the categories of race, class, gender, sexuality as well, Patricia Collins says, nation, ability, ethnicity, and age are interrelated as mutually shaping one another. So we use intersectionality to understand the complexities behind people's interactions, human experiences, and power positionings. So how one is positioned within society depending on their identity categories. Now, I just briefly wanted to also have a look at how these issues were seen or have been seen in the Finnish context, and I should say the Nordic context as well, because these are themes that are recurrent in the Nordic scholarly literature as well. The concept of race as an analytical category and the concept of racialization have not been so openly discussed in recent decades, let's say. Only now in recent years, we have had more and more literature on race and inequality and even intersectionality. But in the past, the tradition has been to rather hide these topics behind a universalism, behind welfare universalism, a principle of equality in the Nordic countries, and a sort of color evasiveness, which means to avoid talking about race because it was deemed as not important because people were considered equal. So rather, the discussion that sparked out of debates around immigration in the recent decades was based on the theme of culture. So people were seen as different in culturally relevant ways. And these cultural differences were universalized in a way, were essentializing people, were dividing people in different categories. So there was the Western culture on one side and the rest of the other cultures that were othered through these discourses. And so by talking about culture, there were the use of the word culture and cultural differences were also based on nationalist systems of thought and systems of thought based on power and hegemony. So there has not been a vocabulary to talk about matters related to race and racism and anti-racism until recent decades, like Rastas, for example, says, and Keskinen. And the term intersectionality has been recognized as a neologism in 2020, as the Institute for the Languages of Finland says on their website. And now I have come to the end of this part. If you have any questions, anything that you would like to ask now, please feel free to write it in the chat in any language that we can respond to. In Finnish, obviously. And we are very glad to answer to your questions if you have any. Otherwise, I have here a little quiz to break the stream of my speech, which has been going on for a bit. And if Akuna or Sara can share the quiz link in the chat, that would be very helpful. I should say that the quiz is timed, so I warn you, there is a time limit to do it. It's just to check whether some concepts, the concepts are clear until now, and have a bit of a play around with the concepts.
It's in the chat now.
Thank you very much. It should take you a couple of minutes to do this, so yes, have fun. Okay. If you have any comments on the quiz, or I hope it's worked for everyone. If you have any comments, please, as I said, just drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I am going to continue. So, yes. So I said I would continue talking about, in the second part, talking about my PhD work and how this relates to intersectionality and how intersectionality is a core part of it. So my PhD title at the moment is Belonging Through Education, Adult Students' Experiences of Integration in Finland. And I will tell you a little bit more about it. So my focus is on adult education in integration programs, which are aimed at adult migrant students' experience, at adult migrant students. And my focus is on the experiences of integration on one hand, and the sense of belonging that the students are fostering or developing in Finland. So I observed in 2022, I did the first phase of my data collection at a VET, at a vocational education training school. And in 2023-24, and I did the second part of my data collection, where I observed and interviewed migrant students learning Finnish in a general upper secondary school. So it was a multi-sited data collection. And I interviewed students, as I said. I also interviewed teachers and career counselors and students and teachers in the second part as well. And the themes that I was looking at were the students' experiences of school, as well as the migration process and the settling process in Finland, and issues related to social relationships and building social relationships and family life, which are at the center of my second paper, and the aspirations that the students have and want to fulfill through the educational system, and their experiences of career guidance, which are at the center of my first paper. My first paper is written with my supervisor, who is Mira Kalalahti from the University of Helsinki, from the University of Jyväskylä, sorry, and my colleague Åsa Sundelin from the University of Sweden, of Stockholm in Sweden. And our paper talks about issues of career guidance and counseling in VET schools, in my case, in the case of Finland, and in language introductory programs in the secondary schools in Sweden, in the case of Sweden. And what we are looking at is the relationship between career guidance and counseling and the opportunities for social inclusion that this allows for. And in order to do this, we observed and interviewed and used this material to analyze what different actors do to cope with the discrepancies that there are between the policy level of career guidance and the practice level. Sometimes there is a big gap, and teachers, as well as school leaders and the students themselves, have to cope with sometimes a lack of support or a discrepancy between the needs of the labor market and the actual education pathways. And in my case, in the Finnish case, the students were in their interviews were saying how they were left to themselves in this career education. They were getting quite little guidance from their own point of view, and what they resorted to was actually self-help, self-reliance. They were relying mainly on their own means to make their own decisions and educating themselves on the labor market. and also on their networks, which were mostly made of other migrants around them. And I should say it's an important element that the students that I interviewed and the students that were willing to participate and the students that I encountered in both these institutions were, for the vast majority, so out of 30 participants, 28 were held a non-European passport, which is very important as in the from the intersectional point of view, because as the nationality was impacting greatly their experiences, because most of them had to work and study at the same time, and what they were working in was mainly restaurants, so catering industry, and the cleaning sectors. So they mainly had these experiences, and some of them were in education also to have better career prospects as well. And some of them had just arrived and so started working in these low status jobs. And there is previous research that says that although a lot of people while studying start working in low status jobs, there is little social mobility for migrants who start from low status jobs. So definitely a discrepancy, and a discrepancy based on nationality as well as race, as well as students from certain backgrounds, from racialized backgrounds, have very big problems and issues when facing the labor market. There is much research on this topic by now, and there is also a lot of discussion, public debates on how immigrant people, migrants, face significant barriers when trying to enter the labor market. And starting from Ahmad's paper, which I don't have on this slide, but I have included in the references. Ahmad is a researcher at the University of Helsinki who published a paper in 2016, I believe, or 2020. He published two papers, but the one that I'm talking about, I think, is from 2016. And he talks about racial hierarchies when people go face the labor market, as mostly people from non-Finnish backgrounds and racialized backgrounds face discrimination in the recruitment process, even based on their surnames to start with. And who advances the most in the recruitment processes are Finnish background people, as well as white and Western European, Western migrants, English speaking. So I have here I have a couple of examples of these public debates, these outputs in the public debate, in the media, on the Helsingin Sanomat, as well as on Yle. There was a lot of discussion in recent months and years. And I also have here a dissertation by Kvin Ndomo from the University of Jyväskylä, who advanced the fact that highly educated migrants from African backgrounds face significant challenges in the Finnish labor market, so much so that there is a segmentation of the labor market which in a way gives space to migrants only in the secondary sector, and where conditions of work and benefits through work are limited. And so there is a sort of the creation of a working underclass by the barriers that are put through the processes of recruitment for these people. So this was about my first paper. So the first paper is based on race, nationality, and how they make up the experience of career guidance and also experience with the labor market. Right. And the second paper, which is in review by now, explores integration through relationship building topics, issues, and the sense of belonging, and how the three elements, so integration on one hand and social integration, combined with a sense of belonging that people want to foster, to feel at home, interact for the students that I interviewed and observed. And the paper was asking two things in particular: what elements contribute to adult students' sense of belonging, and what do the intersection of race, nationality, and gender mean? What impact do they have in people's experiences of sense of belonging and relationship building? So I have here a quote, a slide with quotes from the data that I collected. This is interview data in particular, and I have 4 examples of people that I interviewed, and I'm going to introduce them to you a little bit. So the first one is Alicia. Alicia is a migrant from Latin America. She came to Finland quite a long time ago. At the time of the interview, I believe it was 7 years before the interview. She migrated to pursue a master's in Finland and then stayed for a longer time. And in this quote, she talks about, you will see, when she talks about racism and relationships, the individual relationships with society and interactions between the individual and the society. And then Frank is a West African man from a refugee background, so very different experience. Didn't come to Finland for work, for study reasons, but was now, when I interviewed him, learning Finnish as well as Alicia. And he talks about inclusion, and he talks about, again, the relationships, the relationship barriers that he's faced. And then Leila also had lived in Finland for a very long time. I believe 9 years at the time of the interview. She is from South Asia, and she also came to Finland for study reasons. She came to pursue a master's in Finland, and then had a family in Finland and has a family now. And she also talks about the circles of friends that she has built. And she's back in education to try and get out of the job that she eventually, as a student and also after studying, had to do, which were mainly in cleaning and hospitality. And Yasmin is another young woman from South Asia. She's a bit younger, and she's newly arrived. She was newly arrived in Finland at that time, and she talks about the relationship with her culture and the relationship between Finland and her culture. and she was also studying in the vocational education school. So are there any questions at this point? No. Okay, so what I would like you to do now, I'm going to stop sharing, although I don't know, yes. Going to stop sharing here, and I am going to try and copy this link if I can in the chat, but I don't know where the chat is. Where do I see the meeting? No. Sorry, I am having I don't know how to.
It's there at the top, like the first one.
Yes, I can see the chat now. Thank you. Here it is. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is to open the Miro link that I pasted in the chat. And on Miro, you will see that there are these quotes. There are these quotes, and there are sticky notes, and there are 2 questions for you to use when you discuss and you want to write your answers down. So now, can I put you in breakout rooms? I am not sure if I can put you in breakout rooms.
But maybe we are so small groups, so actually
exactly. Yes, we can also do it as individual activity as well, and then perhaps we can just reconvene here in the plenary room and discuss it all together. So you can just use those sticky notes to have a look at the quotes and answer the questions there. There are 2 questions. So how do these students experience relationship building in these quotes? And what kind of relationships are mentioned in the quotes and with whom? And thinking about intersectionality as well. So very much thinking about intersectionality. How does this explain these people's experiences? And can you please tell me if the Miro works fine? I can see that people are already moving things, so it should be. I have a private mode on, so people can't really see your answers at the moment. So you feel free to just write, and I don't think I can, well, maybe I can. But yeah, I was thinking perhaps 6-7 minutes to do this, and then we reconvene in the main room. Does this work? Hopefully.
Perfect.
And I guess maybe from that you don't also have to limit yourself to these questions that Alessandra posted. So if you have other observations that you want to write there, and you can also write in Finnish.
Absolutely, yes. Good point, yes. Feel free to write in Finnish, absolutely. And feel free to write everything that these spark.
Alessandra, there's a message that the questions...
Yes, that you can see the questions. So the questions are at the top left corner where it says activity 1, I don't know if you can you see that there?
Maybe we can copy paste them in the chat, and maybe
Yeah,
if you don't mind
absolutely,
sharing
yes.
again the
Yeah,
slides.
I can do that too, yes.
And if you can share the quotes here again in the chat, sharing the screen, so then people can also work here if they cannot access Miro.
Yeah. So these are the questions. And the quotes are also in the chat.
should we start
Yes.
unpacking the...
Yes, sure. Okay, thank you for engaging with the quotes. I can see many interesting points. And if I can't really translate all the Finnish, maybe Akuna and Sara can help me. So starting from Alicia's quote, the one on the top left corner. So I can see so experience of racism, for sure, yes. Experience of racism, especially the friend that is darker skinned, and she talks about how she is white passing, so she doesn't have the same experiences that her friend might have. So definitely race plays is very important within the interactions with society, with the rest of the society, and daily interactions, right? And vaikeus tunnistaa itseään ja samalla ystävyysverkkoa. So is it feeling of loneliness? Yes.
And maybe like difficulties with sense of self.
Yeah, difficulties with sense of self. Yeah, for sure. Also, there is a dichotomy, or like, let's say there is a double experience with Alicia, because yes, she is white passing, but also at the same time experiences the same discriminations as being a non-European, as a person from a non-European background. So she also has low status or more low status jobs compared to other people in her circle, for example, and she has to comply with the visa requirements, which also have an impact on her experience. And then what do we have? Friendship, yes. Yeah, with a person from the same background, as well as Leila says as well, for example, on the blue quote, kaikki samasta maasta, so everyone is from the same country. All the friends are from the same country, and actually she says, a lack of what she says integration, because she doesn't have any Finnish friends and she doesn't know where to meet Finnish people, actually. And this was a very recurrent theme in most of the interviews. And perhaps kaipaisi monikulttuurisuutta, että ei olisi vain. Yes, so she misses multiculturalism as well, yes, and she would like her kids to experience a more multicultural society as well. And this is similar to the green quote by Yasmin, who says as well that she on the other hand is ashamed of her own culture, and she feels, as this comment says, she feels a bit of an outsider because she's the only one that celebrates a particular well, she's the only one putting henna on her hands, and she feels like she doesn't really belong because of that, right? And to go finally to the left bottom corner. So it is difficult for him as a man, for sure, to build relationships, and he experiences loneliness as well. He experiences segregation in a way, like really exclusion, let's say, and feel the feeling of deep loneliness in this interview. So yes, thank you for your comments. Is there anything I missed, Sara and Akuna? No.
Oh, you got it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I will try to share the slides again. Let's see. Can you see it? Yes. All good. Yes. So I think we are now. I had also here a few points. So what impacts these people's experiences: race, gender, and class. Race, gender, and class here as well. Race, gender, and marital status as well in her case, and race and gender for Yasmin as well.
I think you have to still go like present mode so we can see the text from Canva.
Sorry, what? Can I?
It's too small, the text.
Yeah, sure. Oops, and now it's too big. This is better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so we
Right.
can read. Thank
Okay.
you.
Excellent. So, yes, I think we've covered these points of how the multiple intersections affect people's fostering of sense of belonging, and how encounters are based on race and gender and class, and how they define relationship building for the students. And this is the end of my part. And here I have the references that I used, and I have a second slide here as well. And yes, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Over to you, Sara and Akuna.
Yes, thank you so much. If there are any questions now, you can ask or write in the chat. Alessandro will still be here with us for the rest of this session. But maybe we can have a 10-minute break here, and then we will continue with the workshop part. So let's come back at 13 or 12. And we were also thinking maybe we can stop the recording so that the workshop part we can talk freely and people can voice questions and uncertainties and opinions without any sort of